Day 25 of this war. Don't let the headlines of ceasefire confuse you. They're still fighting. Tel Aviv has been hit in the latest strikes. The attacks on Lebanon are expanding. The only difference is that diplomacy is finally on the table. Peace mediators have emerged. There are reports of the US and Iran holding talks that Pakistan wants to host. And the world over, the oil shock is spreading.
Over the past few days, the headlines have been filled with talk of ceasefires, negotiations, and back-channel diplomacy in the Middle East. But beneath those headlines, the reality looks very different. The war involving the United States, Iran, Israel, and multiple countries across West Asia is not winding down. It is expanding, becoming more complex, and increasingly unpredictable. And as this conflict drags on, the consequences are no longer limited to the battlefield. They are spreading into global energy markets, currency markets, bond markets, and even the crypto market, where volatility is starting to react almost in real time to geopolitical developments. Right now, what we are seeing is a dangerous combination of military escalation and financial fragility. Oil prices are swinging on every new strike, every new threat, and every new statement from Washington or Tehran. The Strait of Hormuz remains a critical pressure point, global supply chains are on edge, and investors are trying to figure out whether this conflict stays regional or turns into something much bigger. Because if it does, the impact on the U.S. economy could be far more serious than most people realize, especially at a time when debt levels are already at historic highs, and the financial system is more sensitive to shocks than it has been in decades. In this video, we're going to break this situation down from two different angles. First, we'll look at the geopolitical reality on the ground, with reporting from journalist Palki Sharma, who lays out exactly what is happening right now across Iran, Israel, Lebanon, and the wider region, and why the talk of peace may be misleading. Then we'll shift to the market side of the story with Jack Mallers, CEO of Strike, who argues that this war is not just a military conflict. It's a financial stress test for the United States itself, one that could expose deep weaknesses in the bond market, the dollar system, and the broader fiat economy. And stay with me until the end, because after Sharma's report, we're going to hear Jack Mallers explain why the bond market, not the battlefield, could decide how this war ends, and what it means for stocks, crypto, and the U.S. economy. If you follow geopolitics, macro, or Bitcoin, this is one you don't want to miss. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you think happens next. Thanks, and enjoy the video. Buy $10,000 of Bitcoin on a regular exchange. It grows to $60,000. That $50,000 profit? You could owe $10,000 or more in capital gains tax. Now do the same trade inside a Roth IRA with iTrustCapital. That growth? Tax-free. You keep the full $50,000. Same crypto. Completely different outcome. iTrustCapital lets you hold crypto in a self-directed IRA, trade 24/7, and secure your assets with institutional-grade custody. You can also hold gold, silver, and stake certain assets. Real U.S. customer support. $100 bonus when you fund through the link below. In crypto, structure beats timing. Every time.
Day 25 of the war. What is happening in West Asia? Are they still fighting or are they talking peace? The answer is they're doing both. Talks behind the scenes and missiles in the air. That is the situation right now. We've seen a lot of confusion around what's happening. Some people are asking, is this a ceasefire? Does this mean that the war will end soon? So first of all, let's set the record straight. There is no ceasefire in West Asia. Israel and the US continue to attack Iranian sites. The only difference is this: President Donald Trump has delayed his attacks on power plants. That's all. But apart from that, all the military targets are still being hit. So simply put, the war is on, which brings us to the latest battlefield updates. What is happening? Iran launched more missiles overnight. Some of these launches are trolling the US president because the missiles feature edited pictures of Donald Trump. At least one of them slammed into Tel Aviv. Several buildings were damaged in this attack. At least 6 people were injured. Another missile hit northern Israel, and this comes after 2 major hits over the weekend. So clearly, the cost is rising for Israel. We are seeing more Iranian projectiles breaching the Iron Dome. Over in the Gulf, the intensity appears to be falling. Projectiles were fired at Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Bahrain. So far, no damage has been reported. In the Strait of Hormuz, the situation remains unchanged. Iran's military continues to be in charge. We've seen the US try to destroy some of Iran's maritime capabilities, yet Tehran appears to be confident. They say they can control the strait without laying sea mines.
Given our sufficient dominance and capability, there is no need to lay mines in the Persian Gulf, and we will make use of every available means to ensure security whenever necessary.
Which brings us to the other side. Israel continues to bomb Lebanon to the north. They hit parts of Beirut and southern Lebanon. So far, more than 1,000 people have been killed in these attacks. That's 1,000 deaths in Lebanon. Plus, more than 1 million people have been displaced. Israeli soldiers and tanks are moving in. We've told you about this before. Israel sees Lebanon's Litani River as a natural boundary. Their goal is to control the area to the river's south. And what about the people living there? Israel's defense minister says they should leave. These people should leave. He says these people cannot return home until northern Israel is secure.
The IDF is maneuvering into Lebanese territory to seize a forward line of defense, eliminating Hezbollah terrorists and destroying the terror infrastructure built there. Hundreds of thousands of residents of southern Lebanon who evacuated north will not return south of the Litani River until security is guaranteed for the residents of the north.
There are two main concerns here. One, a full-blown ground invasion could be a bloodbath. We've seen that in Gaza since 2023. And two, how long will Israel occupy this land? We know what happened with the West Bank. We also know what happened with the Golan Heights. Will southern Lebanon go in the same direction? And this is a big concern for the world. Yesterday, French President Emmanuel Macron warned Israel. He said occupation cannot lead to peace.
At a time when others would like us to believe that security can only be ensured by invading the neighbor we fear, Lebanon reminds us of one thing: the power of universality. No occupation, no form of colonization, not here, not in the West Bank, nor anywhere else, is able to ensure the security of anybody.
So the Lebanon front is escalating fast. It's a brutal and expanding battle, and it's drawing in the Iranians as well. Tehran has issued a threat to the Israeli military. They're warning of heavy missile hits on Israeli positions in the north. Which brings us to the situation in Iran. Unlike Lebanon, it is harder to gauge what is happening in Iran because Iran is under a complete internet ban. You won't see mobile phone videos. You won't see eyewitness clips from there, not like you see from Israel or Lebanon. Even in the Gulf, they have cracked down on such videos. It is illegal to record and post videos of attacks in Gulf countries. So it's tough to assess the ground situation in these countries and in Iran, of course. What we do have are Israeli and US claims. Israel claims to have hit more than 3,000 targets in Iran. That's 3,000 plus in 25 days of fighting. Overnight, they hit more than 50 targets. These include missile storage facilities and command centers. The US military also continues its onslaught. Overnight, they hit Iran's mobile missile launchers. If Iran is desperate, so is Trump. He wants a quick resolution to this war. Yesterday, he admitted that he wants a deal with Iran. Basically, this is not some fight to the finish. This is a fight to a deal. The question is, who can broker such a deal, and where are these talks heading?
As Sharma points out, even as the fighting continues, there are signs that diplomacy may be quietly taking shape behind the scenes. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said his government is ready to host talks between the United States and Iran, offering Islamabad as a neutral ground for negotiations. According to officials familiar with the discussions, the idea being considered is a meeting that could take place as early as this week, with the United States potentially represented by Vice President J.D. Vance. President Trump himself amplified the speculation by sharing Sharif's statement online, adding to the impression that some form of dialogue may be underway, even as both sides continue military operations. But this is exactly the kind of situation that creates instability in financial markets. When missiles are still being fired while negotiations are being discussed at the same time, investors don't know whether to price in escalation or de-escalation, and that uncertainty is already showing up in oil prices, bond yields, currencies, and increasingly in the crypto market as well. Jack Mallers believes this isn't just another geopolitical conflict. It's a stress test for a financial system that is already under pressure, and the way markets are reacting to every headline may be telling us more about the real risk than the battlefield itself.
These guys understand financial markets. So Trump posts this very intently right before markets open. Markets open, oil goes down, stock market goes up. I think Bitcoin was up 5% on this Truth Social post. When I tell you guys, within the hour, Iran responds. By the way, the fact that I have to use Twitter to check the validity of what my president is saying is nuts. This is absolutely, I feel like I'm in a video game. I'll get wind of something Trump is saying and not know if it's serious enough or not. So I have to go to Twitter and translate some Iranian post. But sure enough, Iran says, the Iranian people demand complete and remorseful punishment of the aggressors. All Iranian officials stand firmly behind their supreme leader and people until this goal is achieved. No negotiations have been held with the United States, and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the U.S. and Israel are trapped. Holy moly. You cannot make this up. Trump tries to calm markets, which we'll get into in a second. Tries to calm markets. He doesn't want the bond market to get out of hand. He doesn't want the stock market to crash. He doesn't want the oil market to get out of hand. And Iran comes on Twitter.com and calls his bluff. This is spoken by a man in a country that doesn't really seem to be in the mood to negotiate. They further added on Twitter, our people demand the complete and humiliating punishment of the aggressors. All officials stand firmly behind their leader. Israel and America are in a quagmire. This guy does not sound like he wants to negotiate. Doesn't sound like he's up for a deal. Doesn't sound like he feels like he's dispositioned. He doesn't sound like he feels like he's losing a war. Am I right or am I right? And later on in the day, this was a few hours ago, we learned that Iran says the war will continue until all sanctions are lifted and war damages are paid for in full by the United States of America. So unless they get reparations from the U.S. and full sanction relief, they're going to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. And let's just be clear about what's happening here. This meme from Luke says it all. Who's your daddy, Gary? Who's your daddy? And it's the financial markets. If I go back, I say, what have I said over the last few weeks, guys? Iran is not going to use nuclear to fight back against the United States. How are they going to fight back? They're going to use markets. When people say, oh, this reminds me of the 70s. Oh, this reminds me of the 90s. No, it doesn't. Because debt to GDP wasn't 125%. Real interest expense wasn't 130% of receipts. You guys have to you have to understand what's different this time. Because it's very hard to say, no one loves the guy that says this time is different. But this time is different mathematically. Why is this time different? Well, because we have almost $40 trillion of debt. We're coming off the back half of COVID with the highest recorded inflation in U.S. history. And so this fiat regime has reached its dead end, its inevitable dead end. You're either going to have to face some form of hyperinflation and yield curve control, or the whole system collapses. But the United States can't perpetually borrow money forever anymore. The bond markets are demanding higher yield. People are not willing to finance wars like this. Iran and everyone around the world knows this. This is a known weakness. And so the reality of the situation is, who's your daddy? Why did Trump tweet this? Iran's exactly right. Trump is trying to calm markets and buy himself some time. Israel comes out and says, I have no idea what Trump's talking about. Iran comes out and says, this guy's full of shit. This is the craziest timeline I've ever lived through. I have no idea if my country's lying to me or not. I have no idea why we're in this war. I have no idea about anything. It used to be we're taking out the regime, then it turned to nuclear. I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea. But I'll tell you this. This time is different because we're so indebted. The bond market is so fragile. And the U.S. is so reliant on folks like China. The United States cannot engage in a large-scale conflict without China. The United States has relied on fiat and the ability to print money out of thin air for decades and decades and decades and decades. And despite warning after warning after warning after warning, in every rational, anyone with a brain saying this isn't going to work, this is dangerous, this is destructive, you're hollowing out the middle class, you're hollowing out your industrial base, you are pushing your smartest minds to be high-frequency arbitrage traders instead of developing productive things for the market, real physical things for the market. In order to make it in the United States, you have to go get a university degree and become either a hedge fund manager, high-frequency trader, or Silicon Valley venture capitalist. That's the system we've designed and created. There's no market to make things with your hands. There's no market to make things of physical value. We print money, we ship it overseas, we import all the things that we actually consume. And you build a world where how productive are you actually? How productive are your people?
What makes this situation so unusual is how quickly financial markets are reacting to every political signal coming out of Washington and Tehran. In recent days, Bitcoin and the broader crypto market surged after President Trump announced that planned strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure would be postponed following what he described as productive discussions. Oil prices dropped sharply, bond yields fell, the dollar weakened, and risk assets moved higher almost immediately. But those gains didn't last long. When Iranian sources denied that any talks had taken place, markets reversed, Bitcoin pulled back, and volatility returned across stocks, commodities, and digital assets. This kind of price action tells you that investors are no longer reacting only to economic data. They're reacting to geopolitical headlines in real time. And that's a sign of a system that is already fragile. The United States is carrying historically high debt levels, interest costs are rising, and the bond market has become extremely sensitive to anything that could force more spending or disrupt global trade. A prolonged conflict in the Middle East raises all of those risks simultaneously. Higher oil prices can push inflation up again, which makes it harder for the Federal Reserve to cut rates, which in turn keeps pressure on the Treasury market. That chain reaction is exactly what traders are watching right now. For Bitcoin and the crypto market, this creates a very unusual environment. On one hand, geopolitical tension can cause short-term sell-offs as investors move into cash or safe haven assets. On the other hand, the same conflict can also expose weaknesses in the traditional financial system, especially if it leads to more borrowing, more money printing, or more intervention from central banks. That's why you're seeing Bitcoin move almost tick for tick with macro headlines. It's no longer trading like a speculative tech asset alone. It's starting to react like a global liquidity barometer. Another factor is the role of the bond market, which Mallers was talking about. In past wars, the United States had far more room to finance military operations without worrying about interest costs. Today, that margin is much smaller. If investors demand higher yields to hold U.S. debt while the government is increasing spending at the same time, the pressure can build very quickly, and when the bond market starts to wobble, it tends to affect everything else: stocks, currencies, commodities, and increasingly, crypto as well. That's why some analysts believe the real limit on how far this conflict can go may not be military, but financial. For now, the situation remains extremely uncertain. The war has not ended, the negotiations are not confirmed, and the market is reacting to every new development almost instantly. That means volatility is likely to stay high, especially for assets like Bitcoin that sit right at the intersection of geopolitics, liquidity, and global risk sentiment. Whether this conflict escalates or moves toward a deal, the next few weeks could be critical not just for the Middle East, but for the direction of the entire financial system. If you found this breakdown useful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this conflict will escalate, or do markets already know something we don't? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.